waive the 30-day advance notice as our elected officials, but the rest of us mortals have to do the 30 days ahead of time. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Kathleen, and we will start the next segment of the meeting.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Chris and Mayor Taylor and Janet. Now we're going to turn to the candidate panel for the U.S. House of Representatives, 12th District. And for that, I'm going to turn over the hosting role to Eli Nathans, who will be moderating that panel. So just a minute.
Thank you, Kathleen. In the meantime, I'd like to ask Congresswoman Dingell and Mr. Rajput to raise their hands using the hand raised function. I believe you're now attendees, and I will elevate you to a panelist.
Okay, just 2 seconds here.
Let's see.
Yeah.
All right, so that little function worked. Welcome to this panel with the Democratic candidates for Congress in Michigan's 12th Congressional District, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell and Mr. Solomon Rajput. The candidates have agreed on the following procedure. Each will have 2 minutes for introductory remarks. I will then pose questions, some prepared in advance of the meeting, others reflecting questions submitted by the audience via chat. I thank those of you who just submitted questions. You may continue to do so. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question. At the end of the question period, each candidate will have 2 minutes for concluding remarks. The candidates will alternate order of speaking. Congresswoman Dingell will lead off with introductory remarks, followed by Mr. Rajput. Mr. Rajput will answer the first question first. Congresswoman Dingell will answer the second question first, etc. At the end of the panel, each candidate will have 2 minutes for concluding remarks. When 30 seconds are left in each 2-minute period, a yellow sign will appear in my window. Caroline Nathans produced the signs. There's 30 seconds left. And when the time limit is reached, the red panel will appear. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Congresswoman Dingell, you are first. Please go.
Good morning, Eli. Thank you for that introduction. Good morning to everybody at the Washtenaw Dems. I look forward to not looking at you in boxes someday soon, and I hope it's sooner than later. I want to thank you for this opportunity to talk to you all, this forum. It's our second one in 2 days, and I think it's an opportunity to talk to both of us. I'm asking for your vote on August 4 because I think I have worked well with you and want to continue to work well with you on a number of subjects that I care very deeply about. The first is COVID, which has turned the worlds that we all live in upside down. Too many of us have known people that have died, have lost friends and family. Worlds have been upside down. 1 out of 4 people in Michigan is without a job, and it has shined a light on the fractured healthcare system that we have, and may it at long last be the catalyst for this country to get Medicare for all, which I will never stop fighting for, as everybody here knows. The death of George Floyd has put us at a crossroads. It's finally begun the national dialogue on systematic racism, inequality, and injustice that we have to have. And yet at home, we have a lot of other problems. I'm really proud of the fact that Rashida and I were able to get water shut off language in the HEROES bill, that I talked to the governor, and we have prevent water shutoffs, and we have a fund that will help on water shutoffs. The plume, which has been a problem in the Washtenaw County for 40 years, and different communities fighting against each other, and the corporation using that to divide it and not getting cleaned up. There'll be a major development in the courts on the 14th, and we're going to continue. I'm very proud of the fact that I've brought everybody together in trying to get answers to that problem. It's time for everybody to find an answer instead of continuing to sit on a dioxin plume that's continuing to grow. PFAS in our water. People can't fish. We have to be careful of animals not eating the foam. We've gotten a bill finally passed in the House and have efforts underway, bipartisan, to get it through yet this year. I care about
that's 2 minutes. I'm sorry.
Okay, you didn't give me my right. Thank you, Eli.
Mr. Rajput. Mr. Rajput, you have 2 minutes.
My name is Solomon Rajput. Yeah, thank you so much, Eli. Thank you, Washtenaw County Dems, for the forum today. My name is Solomon Rajput. I'm a medical student taking a leave to run for Congress because the issue in our country is way too urgent, and we're done waiting on our politicians to do something about it. When I tell people that I'm a medical student running for Congress, everyone gets so confused. They're like, a medical student running for Congress, is it even allowed? I get it. It's not something you see every day.
Slow down just a little bit because the sound is not coming through that well. Just slow down a little bit. It won't. Then won't have reverberations. Sorry.
Okay, but okay, I get it. It's not something you see every day, but I think we got a halfway decent answer to how people are thinking about it. When I was younger, I was taking a look at our messed up status quo and thinking, you know, it'd be really great to do something about these big problems. Maybe I'll get involved in politics to solve some of these issues. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized way you actually have the government to get anything done. They will literally never do anything because they're just bought and sold by big corporations. And there's no way in heck that I want to sign up to be chilled a big business. So I realized I have to do something else. So ultimately, I ended up in medicine. But now times are changing. Can you guys feel it? We've got a new generation of leaders. We're not going to be holding the court any longer. We're going to go out there and fight unapologetically for what people in this country need for us to get done. It's people like Bernie Sanders and AOC, and that made me think that maybe if we get the right people in, we actually can do something about big issues. I ultimately decided to run because the establishment and the political royalty that run this country have absolutely failed us. That includes Congressman has held the seat for 87 years straight. All the establishment knows how to do is to think small. But it's that same small thing that's gotten us into this mess in the first place. I think by now, everyone can't just keep putting band-aids on our broken systems and expecting things to change. So we've begged and pleaded with our politicians for a long time to go out there and fight for these big changes, but they ignored us time. We can only beg for so long before it's clear that these people, they're never going to fight for what we need to get done. They're never going to change. So if we want to get this done, we've got to.
Thank you very much. That is 2 minutes. Mr. Rajput, you will answer the first question. I have to say you are breaking up a little bit. I'm not the only one who's having difficulty hearing you. I suggest you speak a little more slowly, and I think we'll have an easier time understanding you. I'm not sure exactly what the problem is, but we can fix it right now. The first question for both of you, as I say, Mr. Rajput will go first. The national unemployment rate is currently 11%. The pandemic has forced many businesses to close and led to numerous bankruptcies. While Congress has approved roughly $3 trillion in aid, the end of the crisis is not yet in sight. What other actions should Congress take to relieve the hardships being suffered by millions of individuals and families, and to promote the creation of jobs and the revival and survival of businesses? And one of the questions from the audience is about especially auto jobs. Mr. Rajput.
This pandemic has shown just how fragile our corporate economy is. In Michigan, while corporations are at billions of dollars, small businesses and individuals are struggling to pay their bills. Before the pandemic and the 11% unemployment rate that ensued, 78% of workers were living paycheck to paycheck. Now the rent is due and that paycheck is not coming. This is why I support giving immediate relief to renters by canceling all rent, utility, and mortgage payments. I also support the creation of a fund for landlords to ensure that they still have an income. Right now, we are probably in one of the largest recessions in history. So what has gotten us out of recessions in the past? Government supporting people, not corporations. To get us out of the Great Depression, FDR's administration created the New Deal. The New Deal put Americans to work by creating infrastructure and improving our environment. He even paid workers to plant trees. This is the perfect time to implement another New Deal. But instead of paying individuals to plant trees, the government must pay workers to help transition our economy away from fossil fuels so we can have a just and sustainable future. The Green New Deal would do all of this, but Congresswoman doesn't support it. Why not? Could it be that she has taken tens of thousands of dollars from fossil fuel companies like ExxonMobil, DTE, and Marathon? You know, every election, politicians talk about how they're going to create jobs, jobs, jobs. I'm sure I'm not alone in feeling like politicians have no idea what they're talking about when they make these promises. I'm like, how are you possibly going to do that? What is your plan? Where are these jobs coming from? With the Green New Deal, we know how we're going to create new jobs. We're going to put people to work by having them build solar panels, wind turbines, mass transit systems, and charging stations for electric vehicles. The Green New Deal is a 2-for-1. It'll help in it and get rid of this corona recession at the same time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rajput. Congresswoman Dingell.
Thank you for the question, Eli. we do need to do something. Michigan is one of the hardest hit states. 1 in 4 people is out of work right now. The House passed the HEROES bill 5 or 6 weeks ago that did a number of things. It addressed many problems. One, it would get money directly to state and city governments so that they are there to give support to local communities, the first responders, the fire, police, school teachers. We also have first of all, we expand unemployment compensation with the additional $600 payment. And I think the Senate has finally acknowledged, and I believe that we will see action with the Senate before the Congress goes home at the end of the month. We do need to worry that people, when this began, we immediately worried about taking care of people so that if they were sick, they weren't afraid to have a COVID test because they couldn't afford it, or B, they couldn't afford to take 14 days and stay at home if they were exposed. So we covered the cost of the test and made sure that they were paid and had money so that they would have something to live on. We expanded unemployment. We made sure that they could not be evicted during this time. There is a very large fund for rent, mortgage, and landlord relief so that we can make sure that people are safe in the house. That's an immediate thing. We made sure that water wasn't turned off. We worried about the food supply and ensuring that children that were in schools that were suddenly not going to be there, whose only meals are at the school, would have access to the summer lunch school program. So we were continuing to feed them. And we have to worry about the food supply now. So all of that has to happen. Longer term, we do have to. I agree with the ideas in the new Green Deal, which is why I am the leader of the 100% clean economy to have a carbonless society by 2050 to ensure that we are going to get there. But labor has to be at the table. I'm already working with the UAW and the National Green Deal so that we are together when we reintroduce it next year.
Thank you very much. Next question. First off will be Congresswoman Dingell answering the question, and then Mr. Rajput. The repeated killings of unarmed African Americans by police, as well as the disproportionate share of COVID deaths that have been suffered in the African American community, are two of the many signs of the distance the United States still has to travel to create a society in which citizens of all backgrounds and skin colors can live in dignity and with security. What are the 3 most important steps American citizens and governments should take to promote equal access to opportunity, to justice and dignity for African Americans? Do you support actual reparations for slavery and over a century of discrimination at the scale of the offense? If not, why not? If so, what would these reparations look like? Congresswoman Dingell.
That's a lot to answer in 2 minutes. First of all, I'm going to say it is very clear that African Americans are being disproportionately impacted by COVID. 13% of the population, 14% of the population of Michigan is African Americans, and 43% of the deaths have been African Americans. The first thing we need to do is to pass Medicare for all when we get a Democratic president, because we need to ensure everybody has equal access to health care. There are many for other issues. You know, we've got a very systematic issue that people need to be able to have a good job. And when they have a good job, they can buy a good home. And when they get a good home, they can have a good education. And a good education gets them a good job. It's a vicious circle. We need to address the root problems. We need to pass criminal justice reform and the George Floyd justice in police reform bill, which the House has passed, which would do a number of things immediately. Would end chokeholds. It would ensure that body cameras on. It would keep a national registry of policemen that have had multiple convictions. We saw in Detroit again, another shooting yesterday. Another person was killed. We've seen the videotape. You know, yesterday, a neighbor of mine, son, had a gun held to his head, the infrared light at his eye. And I've been dealing with it all night, haven't slept. And we lost a young policeman from Detroit 1 week ago, from Dearborn, that was born in Dearborn, was working, 26 years old, 2 children, responding to a drunken incident, and he was shot and killed. These are really complicated issues. So we've got to do something. The fact of the matter is, a Black young man is not treated the same as a white young man. We have to attack the root issues of systematic racism, inequality, and injustice, and deal with it now. And I am a co-sponsor of the commission to look at reparations. And I know I'm out of time, but this is such an important subject. You can't talk about it in 2 minutes.
Thank you very much. I agree. These are not 2-minute questions. Mr. Rajput. Mr. Rajput?
The intentional oppression and criminalization of Black people in this country has facilitated the killing of Black people for hundreds of years. As one method of oppression is defeated, another one has always cropped up. First, it was slavery, then it was sharecropping, after Jim Crow, and now mass incarceration and police brutality. It is 2020. How long will the Black community have to wait to see justice? Now we have the actors essential and to call them heroes while we get to quarantine in the safety of our own homes. Black workers are expected to drive buses, stock grocery stores, and work restaurants. We expect them to risk their lives for us so we can keep our lives going. But they're not getting paid more. And if they refuse to work, they can lose their job. And we wonder why over 40% of all the coronavirus deaths in Michigan are from the Black community, even though they only make up 13% of the population. Here's the glaring truth. This country is from top to bottom. This is not the time to think small. Do we really think that we will be able to dismantle systemic racism with a few simple tweaks? The Black community deserves better than slightly reforming a deeply racist nation. We will defund and demilitarize the police. Specifically, we will reduce police budgets to reinvest in community services. I'm the only candidate in this that is calling on police. We will dismantle the prison industrial complex. We will end for-profit prisons. We will eliminate cash bail. We will halt our failed war on drugs. We will legalize marijuana federally, expunge the record of all people in prison for marijuana convictions. In terms of reparations, I don't believe a single cash payment will bring about lasting change. It'll just let our politicians say they did something to fix racism, and now the Black community should be satisfied. That's why I believe reparations must come in the form of strong social programs. We need a $15 minimum wage, one job enough to live on. We need national rent control so communities don't get gentrified. We need Medicare for all to reduce health disparities in the Black community. We need a Green New Deal to create jobs for communities of color. The systemic oppression experienced by Black people in this country requires a systemic solution, not a one-time cash payment.
Thank you, Mr. Rajput. Mr. Rajput, you went to the next question first. The disastrous response to the coronavirus pandemic of the Trump administration and many Republican governors displays the same pattern of denial and lying that characterizes their response to climate change. The fossil fuel industry is spending tens of millions of dollars in political contributions to fight the climate movement, that is, the movement that tries to reduce climate change. What is your strategy for overcoming the denial of much of the leadership of the Republican Party and the influence bought by fossil fuel money? What role should the United States government play in reducing carbon emissions by American citizens and by American corporations and other businesses? Mr. Rajput.
With climate change, we don't have time to do this incremental baby step nonsense any longer. We only have 10 years left before we reach a point of no return. So we need a plan as big as the crisis we're facing. That plan is a Green New Deal, which will create millions of good paying green energy jobs to transition our entire economy off of fossil fuels. With the Green New Deal, we will reach 100% renewable energy for transportation and electricity by 2030. We need a Green New Deal. Fossil fuel money. Republicans know climate change exists, but they are being paid by fossil fuel companies to do nothing about it. Corporate Democrats know climate change exists, but they are being paid by fossil companies to do nothing about it. Representative Dingell has taken tens of thousands of dollars from fossil fuel companies like ExxonMobil, DTE, and Marathon. She doesn't support the Green New Deal. She even arrested climate activists who were protesting for the Green New Deal at her office. Corporate Democrats will say they're taking action on climate change, but they're putting forward baby step proposals that will not solve this crisis, including the incremental climate change legislation supported by Representative Dingell. These Democrats are just pretending to do something so they can appease their voters while serving their corporate donors. With climate change, we know that this is an all or nothing proposition. Either we save our planet or we don't. Either we have runaway catastrophic climate change or we don't. There is no planet B. If you are denying climate change or if you are offering half-hearted plans that won't address this crisis, you are one and the same. You obstruction to what we do to save this planet. We need to do this right now. Not like 10 years from now or 5 years from now, like right now, like today. If elections go in with that, we will enact a Green New Deal in one term. If we always act like this plan will take decades to happen, it'll never get done. Politicians aren't going to do it because they're busy taking money from fossil fuel companies. Then we've got to go do it ourselves because at this point, we're done waiting.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rajput. Congresswoman Dingell.
Thank you. Climate change is the defining challenge of this moment. But to get it passed, you got to bring everybody to the table because it's not going to happen if you don't do it. And I know how to do it. It's the reason that I have been endorsed by the League of Conservation Voters, the Sierra Club, the Clean Water Action, the Wildlife Conservation Fund, because I'm working with them and getting more bills passed through the Congress than any member on environmental issues. We do need to do something about it. You ask the autos. The autos think that I'm the toughest person in the Congress on them, and I am. You know, last summer, one of the young people that was talking to me, and I always talk to them, I am always accessible to everybody, said, you're obsessed with electric vehicles. I'm obsessed with electric vehicles because transportation is 30% of the emissions in this country. And unless we deal with transportation, we will not get to that 100% goal. The Select Committee on Climate Change came out with their report last week, had 8 of my bills in that report to get done. But they said, unless we go to a mandate 100% electric vehicles by the year 2035, we will not get to that goal. So we do need to. One of the things that we passed last week in the Congress that we absolutely need to do is to create more jobs, fix our roads, our bridges, put broadband into rural areas. But we need to, people aren't going to buy electric vehicles until we build the electric vehicle infrastructure throughout this country. My bill to do that is exactly there. So I am very focused on how do you get every person at the table, and workers have to be part of that discussion. They are worried about their job. We will create new jobs, but they're an important person to be at the table. We are going to do that. When Green New Deal gets introduced in the new Congress under a Democratic president, we are working to get everybody at the table to actually get the job done.
Thank you, Congresswoman. You will answer first the next question. Despite the adoption of the Affordable Care Act, health insurance remains difficult for many Americans to afford. Hundreds of thousands of Americans are forced into bankruptcy each year because of medical expenses. The exact number is a matter of debate, but it's very large. For many who buy insurance on the private market and do not qualify for government assistance, that includes many people with middle-class incomes, the combination of high monthly premiums, high deductibles, and high copays means that trips to the doctors are to be avoided, except for annual physicals and the like, in all but the most dire of circumstances. Once the Democrats retake the White House and Congress, what should be done to fix the current inadequacies of the healthcare insurance market? Congressman Dingell.
Pass the Dingell Medicare for All bill in the House. And I have every intention of working with Bernie Sanders. Bernie and I have been working on that. And that's the first thing we've got to do. But, you know, we've got to look at what the short term too is while we're going to get that bill passed. And I'm proud of the fact that we've had 4 hearings, which is the most that's happened in the Congress since the concept has been talked about. We're the only industrialized nation in the world that does not have healthcare, guarantee healthcare to all of its citizens. And for those that don't care about it as a moral issue, which I think that it is, it's an economic issue because our companies are competing in a global marketplace and other companies aren't having to pay for those healthcare costs directly the way that our companies do. It is time. 30 million people still don't have health insurance in this country. Another 40 million can't afford their copays, their deductibles, as you were saying. You know, I hear about it all of the time that we've got to do something right now to make sure. Let's start with making sure when the vaccine's developed that every American, and we figure out how to give it around the world, has access to that vaccine for free, and that they all have access to it. How are we going to make prescription drugs more affordable? You know, when I used to take John to the doctor, it was like having a mini town hall. Many of you have heard me tell these stories. The mother who had the diabetic child who, you know, let's not forget that Donald Trump is, this whole crisis is going on right now, is at the Supreme Court trying to take away coverage for people with pre-existing conditions. We have to immediately guarantee that every American who has a pre-existing coverage is still going to be able to get access to healthcare. But this mother was scared to death that she was going to lose health insurance for her little girl and that her little girl wouldn't grow up. A woman that was in her 50s who had had a stroke and was scared to death she was going to lose her insurance. I'm going to work with Joe Biden when we elect him to get Medicare for all. And I'm going to make sure, I'm going to make sure that we build the coalition in the majority that is going to take this over the finish line. That's my job, and I'm going to get the job done.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rajput.
We find ourselves in another election where healthcare is the single biggest issue in our country. We have to ask ourselves, why does healthcare remain our biggest issue year after year? In other countries, healthcare isn't their biggest issue. At some point, they figure it out, and so should we. We need a Medicare for all single-payer system right now. The Democratic Party loves to aim small because they're convinced that no big structural change will ever get passed. With Obamacare, we made so many concessions to Republicans in order to get their support. You know how many Republican votes Obamacare got? Literally 0. We have to stop making compromises with people who have no interest in working with us. I've seen the decision of healthcare close and personal. As a medical student, we're like mini doctors. We go with doctors to see patients. I can't tell you how many times we have to tell patients we can't give them the treatment they need because health insurance doesn't cover it. One story in particular really stands out. It's about a sophomore at a local university, and she was telling me about her mom. Getting pretty, but they didn't have insurance, so the mom said, "There's no way in hell I'm going to see a doctor because we can't afford that. So I'm going to tough this one out." But she kept getting sicker and sicker, and ultimately she got so sick they had no other choice. They had to go to the doctor. It turns out that she had waited too long, and this disease that could have totally been treated if she had seen a doctor earlier ended up actually killing her. So here's the thing. It's not an exaggeration to say that that lady was murdered by a broken healthcare system. Because if she had gotten sick in any other developed country, there's a really good chance she'd still be alive today. Because what has every other developed country been able to figure out? They've been able to figure out how to make healthcare a human right, which is just a fancy way of saying, if you're sick, you should be able to see a doctor. If you're sick, you should be able to get your medicine, all it's saying. So when we're asking for progressive policies like Medicare for all, nothing we're asking for is radical. We're just trying to play catch up with the rest of the world. What's really radical here is to insist that we can't do this, that we're too uniquely incompetent or incapable or dysfunctional or backwards to get this done. The only thing that's radical here is the status quo. It's unacceptable.
Thank you, Mr. Rajput. Mr. Rajput, I'd like you to answer the next question. This was posed by a member of the audience. Women still do not make the same wage per hour as men for the same work. What do you think you can do or Congress can do to help change this? Mr. Rajput.
Our country was built by wealthy white men. That means that the systems in place, whether it's our educational system or our job market or systems of government, all benefit white men at the expense of everyone else, including women and non-gender conforming people. This is sexist, and sexism has no place in this country. Reproductive healthcare is constantly under attack. Women are discriminated against in the workplace. Trans youth have an extremely high rate of suicide, and the gender and racial wage gap is absolutely appalling. The issues that women and gender non-conforming people face are systematic. So we need policies that change our racist and sexist system at the root and not just band-aids that fix the issues for a little while. So we need college for all because 2/3 of all student debt in this country is held by women. Until we make college free and eliminate student debt, women will never have economic equality in this country. We need free childcare for all because right now so many women are stuck in extremely abusive domestic violence situations because they can't afford childcare and they're scared to leave. We need racial justice in our healthcare system because Black women are more likely to die from childbirth complications than white women are. We need criminal justice reform because the cops would never use a no-knock warrant to murder a white woman the way that they did to Breonna Taylor. We need to give tribal governments jurisdiction to prosecute people on their own lands because 8 out of every 10 indigenous women are never found. And we need to abolish ICE so that women and families who are coming here with their children to seek safety aren't locked up in cages with zero oversight government. It's a systemic, intersectional change we need so that we can lift every woman up in this country.
Thank you very much. Congresswoman Dingell.
Well, the fact of the matter is, I'm a woman, and the world isn't changing fast enough. I had thought by the time that this generation might understand the equality of women, but I still find women being judged based on who they're married to or what their history was. I've worked my entire life. I worked for General Motors for more than 3 decades. When I interviewed for that job, the man that interviewed me said to me, "Why would a woman want to work at General Motors?" I had to work 3 times as hard as any man just to be treated the same. And I never made, the entire career at GM, never made what a man made at GM. And if you spoke up, if you said anything, it's one of the reasons why the Me Too movement meant so much to me, because I know what it was like to be sexually harassed at work. When I had a man that fouled me, researched me, was actually stalking me, I got told, put up with it or leave. So I know what it's like for a woman, and I'm luckier than most women. You talk about, I say this frequently, 4 months ago, when we got into this crisis, we are now being held together by people we didn't think were worth paying $15 an hour. And they are the glue of our society. And most of them are women. We aren't paid the same amount of money from law firms to hospitals to the factory floor. Women are not treated the same and are not paid the same. And it's time. We have passed legislation in the House to address that. Childcare is probably the single biggest issue we are facing right now as a crisis in this country. It was a crisis before, but COVID and the thought of no school this fall and crises, that falls upon the woman, and they have to pay the cost. We still have a long way to go in equality for everybody, everyone, every race, sex, gender.
Thank you, Congressman Dingell. I'd like to ask you again to answer the next question first. What should Congress do to protect unions from attacks by state governments in the form of so-called right-to-work laws and by the Supreme Court repeatedly in cases that undermine the ability of unions to represent the interests of workers?
I want to say this. We voted for the PRO Act in the House of Representatives. We're not going to get that passed until we defeat Donald Trump in November, elect a new president, and God willing, I do believe we're going to elect a Democratic Senate to boot. Single most important thing we can do on every one of these issues we're talking about today is to make sure we elect a new president. But having said that, we need to not be afraid to talk about the importance of unions. Too many people don't recognize or acknowledge things that they take for granted in their everyday work life was negotiated by a union. A 40-hour work week, safe working conditions, the student to teacher ratio in a classroom, the doctor to nurse patient in a hospital, your holiday, your vacations, your pension benefits, if you're lucky enough to work for a union that's gotten them, have all been negotiated by a union. And when there are other people that aren't members of that union, you'll find that your wage base goes up as well. Unions are the backbone of this country, and it's one of the reasons that Republicans are trying to destroy them. They don't want to pay a fair wage. We have all got to tell the story of working men and women across this country and make sure they've got the right to bargain, to negotiate, and to protect all of us. I was proud to walk the picket lines with General Motors last fall. I have many friends I'm very proud to be endorsed by most of the unions in this election cycle, because I work with the working men and women of this country. I listen to them, and we're ever going to be allowed out again, I'm in a union hall every single weekend of some kind, because I want to know what's on their mind. And now I'm trying to figure out how I talk to them. And they care about a lot of things like bad trade deals and a lot of other issues. If Democrats want to win this year, I'm telling you, everybody, I know this is a candidates forum, but I'm back. Don't take this election for granted. We have to talk to working men or women about the issues that matter to them.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rajput.
Union workers are more likely to have health insurance, higher wages, and pensions once they retire. That's a fact. Large corporations have poured millions of dollars into anti-union efforts and have largely been successful. That's also a fact. Unions aren't as strong as they were years ago. You can see this in public life. Wages are stagnant while the cost of living has skyrocketed. This discourages upward mobility for working class people, while the rich are only getting richer. Study federal expansion of right to work. I also believe we need to repeal the Taft-Hartley Act, which will remove some of the largest roadblocks facing unions. The federal government must also that will penalize companies to try to weaken or discourage unions. One of the biggest issues facing our workers today is the automation and outsourcing of their jobs. The same politicians who say that they will create jobs turn around and sign free trade agreements like SMA, which is the new NAFTA. These agreements have done little to protect workers in our country, to protect our environment, and have hurt low-wage workers in other countries. We must have trade agreements that are executives, and that is why I and many other progressives oppose Trump's USMCA trade agreement, while Representative Dingell and other moderates voted in favor of the agreement. Right now, the rules of the game are rigged against working people. Billionaires are becoming trillionaires, and working class Americans are forced to work 2 to 3 minimum wage jobs just to support themselves. This is unacceptable. And many establishment Democrats have sat by and watched this happen. Huge companies that profit off the exploitation of workers, like Amazon, which is notorious for forcing workers to work with bathroom breaks, they're never punished. In 2018, Amazon literally paid $0 in federal income tax. I can't sit idly as the wealth and money that workers should be making is taken by those at the top. We need strong unions. We need a $15 minimum wage, and we need a progressive wealth tax to give money back to the people. And we need all of this right now.
Thank you very much. Mr. Rajput, I'm going to ask you to answer this question first. It comes from the audience. The 12th district isn't just Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti. We can't forget my hometown, Downriver. Can you work with people who don't support Democrats? Mr. Rajput. So can you work across the aisle? Can you work with voters who are or were Republicans?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. Thank you so much for asking it. So here's the thing. Right now, there is a narrative around bipartisanship. And that narrative is saying that if we all just come together, we all just kind of, we can make compromises, we can make change, it'll be incremental, but over time, it'll make a really big difference. That's kind of the narrative that we all have around bipartisanship, right? And it's great. It sounds perfect. But unfortunately, it's not the case. It's kind of a myth. With the Affordable Care Act, we made so many concessions to Republicans, and unfortunately, we got 0 Republican votes to pass the Affordable Care Act. My goal, and the reason why I'm running, is to champion and enact progressive change for the people in this district and the people of this country. I think at some point we have to look at reality and recognize that although many Republican voters are able to have a civil discourse regarding the issues of our time, the Republican politicians that exist in our house of power are trying to do nothing but to obstruct the progressive agenda or even the Democratic agenda as a whole. So we need to go out there and unapologetically champion our values and get the policies passed that will actually help the people of this country, as opposed to trying to always water down what we're trying to get done and make compromises before we get to the negotiating table in order to appease Republicans who never want to work with us in the first place.
Thank you very much. Congresswoman Dingell.
Well, I think this is probably the issue that Solomon and I probably disagree on the most. I think we're Americans first. And I think that we do have to respect each other. We have to listen to each other. And none of us knows everything. But I don't give an inch when it comes to my values and what I know means standing up for what is right, treating all people equally, fighting for a minimum wage, getting a PFAS standard set, or I could go through a litany of things. But I also know it's important to work with everybody. And I've gotten I'll take PFAS as an example. As we have a bill that passed the House that was bipartisan that sets a strong PFAS standard in this country. We're going to be offering it next week or the week after when we come back in on the National Defense Appropriations Bill, because we're actually trying to get it passed this year. And I'm working to get, we haven't compromised. We haven't taken a watered down standard. We want to get that standard passed. And they called me and said, do you want this just to be the Dingell amendment? I'm like, no, if I can get other Democrats and Republicans on this and get it done, it's not about messaging for me. For me, I focus on getting the job done. Right now, we have a Republican Senate and a Republican White House. And when I care deeply about things, I care deeply about long-term care. I care deeply about taking care of seniors. I care deeply about making sure that they've got money for some of the long-term care they have. I've worked with Republicans. I've gotten the bills done. We've gotten them past the Senate, and the president has signed them. I got a big bill passed last week that will be the most major piece of conservation legislation in a lifetime. Sportsmen, the Wildlife Federation, LCV have all been part of it. It has almost 200 co-sponsors and passed the House in a bipartisan way. These are things that if you really want to get the job done, and by the way, you represent everybody in this district. You owe them respect, and you've got to listen to them, and you got to understand their issues. I will always listen to every person in my district, whether I agree with them or not. I owe them the respect to listen.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I'd like to ask you to answer the next question first. Should Joe Biden debate President Trump? What is to be gained from giving a criminal and serial liar another opportunity to deceive the American people with false claims?
Well, people said, why are you debating Solomon? And I think that we should be debating. And as we've done a couple of forums this week. I think that I think the 3 debates that have been scheduled and have been historically, there's a commission on presidential debates that makes sure that it's a good standard format, Republicans and Democrats together. And I think the American people have to see who the candidates are, and they have to see how you react under difficult situations. We know that he's going to lie. We know that that there are some people that take things out of context. They don't tell the truth. We as the American people have to make sure that we are educated, that we are, when we're reading Facebook and we're seeing all of this disinformation, we got to really have a talk about how we're going to make sure that the information we're reading is accurate. How are we going to attack these things that aren't true? But I am somebody who thinks that you owe it to the people that are going to be voting for you to do a couple of forums so that they can see both of you and have the questions answered. And I think Joe Biden knows exactly who and what President Trump is, and knows how to show what's at stake in this election, and that all of our futures are at stake in November. And I would say to everybody watching today, we got to remember what is at stake in November. And we have to make sure that nobody stays home. Nobody doesn't think that their vote doesn't matter. And we don't take this election for granted.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Mr. Rajput.
Donald Trump is a pathological liar and is a divided nation, but that does not give the Democratic Party the right to refuse a debate. Refusing to debate someone because of their politics is undemocratic, and voters deserve to hear policy critiques from both sides. The Democratic Party needs to use this opportunity of a debate to regain the trust of working people. This should be our message, not that Trump is bad and that we are less bad. Just focus on Trump's negatives, the same strategy we used in 2016 that lost us the election. Biden needs to focus on policies that will improve the lives of people in this country so that people will want to come out and vote. The fact that we are answering a question about whether Biden should debate Trump shows where the mind of the Democratic Party is really at. I mean, instead of talking about whether Biden and Trump should debate, we could be talking about issues that affect everyday Americans, like the skyrocketing cost of college tuition, about young people not showing up to vote for Biden. If Biden really wants to do a simple way to earn it would be by supporting free college and eliminating student debt. The cost of college has gotten so out of hand. It's such a uniquely American problem. People from other countries, they look at how much we pay for school and they get confused. They're like, I don't get it. How do Americans pay that much for school? Americans must be so rich. I'm my friend that's going on. We just spent decades of our adult lives in lots of student debt. It's also a problem that uniquely affects our generation. Elizabeth Warren used to work part-time as a waitress, and she was able to pay herself through school. If someone told me they worked part-time as a waiter and they were paying themselves through the University of Michigan, I'd be like, dude, where are you working? Are they taking applications? Clearly, you're making a ton of money at that. Who even needs this college degree? In this country, we believe that every single child should receive a K-12 education that we all pay for as a public good. Well, times have changed, and it's hard to get a shot at a paid job education after high school. If we can pay for K-12, why can't we pay for 4 more years? That's why I support making college free and eliminating student debt. I'd love to ask Congresswoman Dingell why she does not, but we're too busy talking about whether Biden should debate Donald Trump.
Thank you, Mr. Rajput. Now we've come to the time for closing remarks. Mr. Rajput, you have 2 minutes.
I want to thank Representative Dingell for participating in this debate today. Something that is undeniable about Representative Dingell is that she is present in the community. But we must expect more of our politicians than to simply come to events and give speeches. Congresswoman Dingell is a perfectly nice person, but she's not aggressive. We live in one of the most progressive districts in the country. Democrats get almost 70% of the vote here. We deserve a representative who will champion our progressive values. In this election, we have a choice between an unapologetic progressive and someone who's progressive in name only. A choice between someone who has taken almost $2 million in corporate donations and someone who will never take a cent of corporate money. A choice between someone who's part of a political dynasty that has held a seat for 87 years straight and someone who's been a grassroots activist for years. In this district, which is 6 colleges and universities, I support making college free and eliminating student debt. The other candidate does not. In this district where thousands of people join protests for climate action, I support the Green New Deal. The other candidate does not. In this district where a Black woman was beaten by a white police officer, I support defunding police, specifically reducing police budgets to reinvest in community services. The other candidate does not. We live in revolutionary times. If there was ever a time for change, it is now. But some said even now change is too radical. But what's more radical, Medicare for all in the middle of a global pandemic, or defending greedy companies as they profit off people's illnesses? More radical, Green New Deal that will create millions of green energy jobs to lift us out of this recession, or sitting idly by as climate change ravages our environment? What's more radical, reimagine our criminal justice system, or looking away as innocent Black people are murdered by police brutality? The fact of the matter is, the only thing that's radical here is the status quo. We've been told. They tell us there's a line and we need to know our place. Well, we've waited, and the establishment has left us with a whole lot of nothing. We're done waiting. It's our turn now.
Thank you, Mr. Rajput. Congresswoman Dingell.
Eli, Washtenaw Dems, thanks for the opportunity to talk to you about many of the issues that we care about. I have been honored to represent you these last 4 years, and I want to make it really clear. I'm Debbie Dingell. I've stood on my own 2 feet since I got my first job before my last name even changed. And I stand now. This is a job interview, and I'm accountable to the people of the 12th district on what I deliver for you every 2 years. I care deeply about the 12th district, from the people downriver to the working men and women, the people in the auto plants, Dearborn, the Arab Americans that I represent in Dearborn, to the students at the University of Michigan, the innovators. It all matters. And I try to bring everybody together. I am someone who cares deeply. The nuns instilled in me values that I have spent my life fighting for. And I don't think anybody thinks that I am someone that is shy, quiet, retiring, or sits down and doesn't say what's on her mind. I figure it out. I'm a detail-oriented person that knows what the goal is, sits down, develops the strategy, and then rolls up her sleeves and says, how do we get this done? We do need to worry about student debt. I have a number of educational institutions in this district, and I spend a lot of time on those campuses. But I don't think we need to pay Warren Buffett's grandchildren's education. I think the rich should pay their fair share, and I support the College Affordability Act. I think we should be looking and incentivizing states that give free two-year college education, and we need to be doing more for Pell Grants and make sure that those who need help have help and don't graduate with stay green debt. We are going to have to, there are so many issues that we have, and I'm always going to be me. I'm going to be out there. I'm going to be listening. I'm going to treat people with respect that disagree with me. I'm going to learn from them, and I'm going to go fight to deliver for the people of the 12th district. And I ask for your support again on primary day.
Thank you, Congresswoman. I'd like to thank both Mr. Rajput and Congresswoman Dingell for joining this panel. I think it's been very educational. I thank the audience for its questions. I'm now going to turn the host function back over to Kathleen Murphy for the next panel. Please don't go away.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathleen, you're the host. Kathleen? Actually, Kathleen, you're muted for some reason. You have to unmute yourself. We can't hear you. Not sure what the problem is. I can try, but
Caroline, possibly your headphone have a mute button that you need to unmute your microphone.
it doesn't matter. Nicole Rhodes suggests that you try taking the headphones off. Perhaps that will help.
I would suggest to Kathleen, if you can make Eli host, and maybe you can rejoin. Meanwhile, Eli can get the next panel get up to ready, and then you, hopefully, when you join, you should be able to hear and talk to.
If you could make me host, I will start the process for the next panel.
Okay.
She's still asleep.
Okay, I am going to okay, Eli, I'm going to make you host.
You can, sure.
Yeah. Okay, you are host now. Kathleen, can you please rejoin, and hopefully that will fix the audio issue.